Good Friday afternoon, everybody. It's Jim, it's Matt. It is lunchtime on the East Coast. Hope that you're joining us. Grab that sandwich, bowl of soup, whatever you got going on, and sit down with us. Matt, wild stuff last night. We went from the yin to the yang. In the NFL game, Denver beats Oakland. I'm sorry, the Raiders, 10-7 in what might have been the boringest football game that we've seen in years. And then we have a wild, crazy situation with USF and, UT San Antonio, where UT San Antonio is behind 14-0 in the first quarter, and USF didn't have the ball until the last minute and 27 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, USF hung 31 on them in the second quarter. That's just scoring that many in one quarter is just absurd. Byron Brown was fantastic again last night. Threw for 239 on 14 of 15 passing, 2 touchdowns. He also ran it for 109 yards and another touchdown. So more of him doing what he's done all season. To be honest with you, I mean, he's been fantastic all year. Their 2 losses haven't come because of what Byron Brown has done, especially not that loss in Memphis. And then the game that I had on the TV and I was paying the most attention to was the Raiders and the Broncos, mainly because I have Brock Bowers on my fantasy team. But it was a waste of 3.5 hours, if I'm being frank. One of the worst football games I've ever watched. There were 7 straight drives where the Denver Broncos didn't have a first down.
Wow.
It was. I mean, hey, if you like some good punting, AJ Cole gave you one heck of a first half. He pinned 2 inside of the 2, so
right.
he was on it. He was on it last night, and they had the better punting game, but man, they just could not execute anything on offense in terms of when they got into the Broncos territory, because the Raiders had more success than the Broncos did on offense for probably 3/4 of that football game. But they get into Broncos territory and they couldn't convert and they couldn't kick field goals because of the way the wind was blowing last night in Denver.
One stat stuck out at me for that game, and it was that there were more penalties. Now, we're not talking penalty yards. We're talking about just penalties. More penalties between the 2 teams than there were actually points.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, literally, with the exception of the punts that AJ Cole dropped inside the 2 or punts that went out of bounds. Even sometimes on punts that did go out of bounds, it felt like there was a flag on every special teams play. Every single one. You're getting a hold, you're getting a block in the back, you're getting something. And I mean, like even for the Raiders, man, they couldn't get out of their own way. Ashton Genty ripped off a big run. And then you've got a guy that's 10 yards behind him and Jack Beck, who's holding his corner. So the holding call gets thrown. They wipe the big run off the board. I mean, it was mistake after mistake after mistake for the Raiders, and just little things. I mean, you had at the end of the game, if this tells you where the Raiders are at in their quarterback situation, Pete Carroll deemed Geno Smith on one leg. And I mean that literally, because he was limping off of the football field every single time they went 3 and out in that fourth quarter. Was better suited for them than Kenny Pickett healthy.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Say what you will about Kenny Pickett. Last year when he was with Philadelphia, he came in and won 2 games.
Yeah, I will say, and this is not like I'm not saying that he can't play the quarterback position, but watching him throw a football.
I'm sorry, which one of the 2 we're talking about now?
Kenny Pickett.
Okay.
Watching Kenny Pickett throw a football looks like it is like a very strenuous task for him. He has to push that thing out there, and they talk about it because supposedly his hands are not big enough, I guess. It looks like a very labored football that Kenny Pickett gets out there.
Yeah, I understand that, but why would you put Gino out there if he's only on one leg?
I guess the idea is again that's what I'm saying is I think it's genuinely I think the thinking from Pete Carroll is that they have a better chance of winning with Gino out there on one leg because it's not like they were out of the football game. It was
No,
7-10. Like
they
you
had a
guys
chance to
have
tie it
game.
in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so they believe that Gino was their better chance to win. I mean genuinely. As odd as it sounds.
Okay. Well, you know, um, I guess you have to look at Denver has the best record in the AFC now at 8-2.
Yeah. Yeah, they've taken now their record is a lot better than the Chiefs. They do hold the same in
Mm-hmm.
conference record or in
Right.
division record
Right.
as the Chiefs. So, and you expect the Chiefs to continue playing the level of football that they've returned to now that they've gotten Xavier Worthy back and Rashee Rice
Mm-hmm.
back, which I had said earlier in the year. I said it's a rough start. I get it, but when they get those guys back, it adds a different element to their offense, and it has. So Denver's sitting good right now, but the Chiefs will always be in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, and you never know how far the Chargers are going to be away from you.
Yeah, it's a certain set of circumstances where you feel bad for Vegas because if Vegas was good, they would have hands down the best division in the National Football League. And even
Right.
without the Raiders being good, they still might have the best division in the National Football League. And the Raiders just get to, play round robin of getting beat up by them.
Right.
Every couple weeks.
Yeah. It's, on sports talk radio, you hear all kinds of crazy. And this morning it was like, well, the Broncos won, but man, it was an ugly game. I don't, to me, if my team wins and we play poorly, but we still get the W, I'm happy.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. I think that people need to remember that this is the National Football League, the same way they got to remember in college that these are college athletes. And so this isn't a machine that you're rooting for. You're not rooting for a machine. I mean, maybe if you like the Chiefs, you're rooting for a machine.
Right.
But you're not rooting for a machine. Not every win is going to be a blowout of, like comfortable proportions. You take your wins, you make note of the things that probably could have been better as a fan. You point out your issues. You have no impact on the team. You're not calling the coach in for their Monday meeting, giving your notes. So, be upset with what you're going to be upset with, but also remember your football team won. So don't be a big old Debbie Downer.
Well, there's that, look, not every game you're going to get style points. And, if you're the Raiders, okay, the fact that you held Denver to 10 points, that if at the beginning of the day, right, if you're a Raiders fan, you said, hey, look, I can tell you right now that we're going to hold Denver to 10 points. You'd take that.
Yeah. Yeah, you absolutely would. I think a solid example of this is I go back and through the years, like 2021 and 2022, as somebody who's rooting for Georgia, were fantastic years for me. Some of the best years I can remember. And that 2022 Georgia team in particular was considered to be some form of like a world beater. You remember they won that national championship,
Oh, yeah, sure.
56-7. And so they went undefeated throughout the entirety of the year, but they weren't without their scares or their blemishes. They went on the road to Missouri and they won by 4 points in a game that they were losing in the fourth quarter. They had to come back against Ohio State in that Sugar Bowl. The game against Tennessee wasn't exactly, a blowout by any measure. They went on the road to Kentucky and won by 10. So they had their struggles too. Like good teams will still struggle. So, as long as you win, who cares that you struggle? If you've got a good football team, then you expect the better version of that football team to show up the next year or the next year.
Yeah. It's You also learn, from winning those types of games. How many times have we seen poor franchises that lose those close games and they don't learn anything from it?
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
then, you get the situations where for many years, you know, we look at the Patriots, they went to Super Bowls and they had a lot of ugly games, a
mm-hmm.
lot of games they came back from. Yet, at the end of the day, they're hoisting the Lombardi trophy and everybody else is wondering what the hell happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they like I don't know. It's just it's something that gets a little tired after a while. You're
Mm-hmm.
rooting for your football team's winning. Remember that, and relish in the wins. You don't get, you get 17 weeks of NFL football. Lucky if you're lucky enough, you get the playoffs. You get 12 weeks of college football. If you're lucky enough,
Mm-hmm.
you get the playoffs there. So enjoy the weeks when they come. I know it's a large emotional investment that we all make,
Mm-hmm.
and it's easy to get over emotional, but enjoy it as it comes and as it goes, especially if your football team's good.
Yeah, and just to put a pin in this, do you really think that Vandy is concerned if they win by one or by two, or by 10? You
No.
know, they're not that used to winning. So,
Mm-mm.
there they are, they're winning. So what if they're winning ugly at times?
Yeah.
Take the win.
Jim, that was what I was going to start with. I forgot about it off the top of my head. You mentioned the teams that don't learn from losing close games or
Hmm.
don't win those close games. The Falcons are a fantastic example of that. They they suffered some heartbreaking losses over the last 2 years, and they haven't gotten better. They haven't become necessarily better winners. They remain a model of inconsistency week in and
Hmm.
week out.
Yep. And you know, Raheem Morris, who's the coach, I feel kind of bad for Raheem. Okay, if you look, Raheem is. I think this is the third time he's been a head coach. Um, I know he was an interim coach and then he was a head coach at Tampa Bay for a while. So I don't. We'll count if we count the interim job. He was a head coach 3 times. Um, you look at it and you hope that that the way that the structure of the team is put together isn't all his fault.
Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't really have a lot to say. I think at a certain point your blame, if you're Arthur Blank, has got to
Hmm.
stop going to your head coaches, because that seems to be where it's gone, and kind of go to Terry Fontenot. And also understand that you just kind of have a problem, like I said, a problem with winning in that building. Is
Hmm.
like there's not a model of consistency in that building. I've said it. They have the talent to go out and win a majority of their football games they play, but they just come out and they look flat. Like every other week, you just don't know what result you're going to get. And so I think I feel bad for Raheem Morris, but I I don't understand where this inconsistency comes from,
Hmm.
and how it just is able to maintain this level of inconsistency year in and year out.
To your point, if you look at that Atlanta Falcons roster, okay, there are playmakers all over the place on that roster, on the defensive side, on the offensive side. I mean, there's no reason why they shouldn't be, you know, this particular roster, it shouldn't be, stamped in the playoffs and be a contender. Yet they can't get out of their way.
Yeah, I mean, they have two of the better offensive weapons in the National Football League, in Bijan Robinson and Drake London.
Hmm.
Michael Penix has shown that he has the ability to play. He's partially to blame for the inconsistency, but outside of those guys, and you go to maybe Kyle Pitts, probably
Hmm.
option number 3 in that offense. You don't have a lot of receiver depth there. The line's okay. The line's not a glaring issue, but
Hmm.
it's just confusing, because you look at the roster and you look for the holes, and you don't really like see massively glaring holes, maybe wide receiver depth, but outside of that, you don't have a lot. So it makes it all the more puzzling on paper, at least.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's go to your list of things we should be paying attention to from the TV standpoint of the SEC. You wrote a great column, and hope people have had a chance to check it out. And give us your best here for what we're looking for this weekend.
I really went with. I wasn't overall really thrilled with the quality of games in the SEC this week. You know, your nightcap is going to be LSU, Alabama, and Florida, Kentucky. I don't think anybody is going to pick LSU to win that football game. I made note of it in the write up, but there's going to be a lot of people that'll probably talk tomorrow and even today about throughout the changes that LSU has went through. You know, the bye week.
Mm-hmm.
They fired Brian Kelly. They've had that entire bye week. Now they have an interim. So they talk about, you know, how it can rejuvenate a team, and they'll probably change the offense a little bit. I tell you what, firing Brian Kelly didn't do. It didn't fix that offensive line for LSU, and it's not gonna. It didn't matter how many bye weeks you gave them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they're going to stand a chance in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So what I did note was the games that I'm most intrigued. I'm looking at upset potential this week.
Okay.
And those two places are going to be in Nashville, Tennessee, and Starkville, Mississippi.
Okay.
Starting off with Vanderbilt, made all those notes about how LSU's interim and all this, that, and the other. Now Auburn has an interim head coach as well, and DJ Durkin, and they go on the road to Vanderbilt. Auburn, one of three teams that hasn't allowed more than 24 points this year. And the Vanderbilt offense hasn't been good this year. Like Diego Pavia has got prior to last week at Texas, got all this hype and everything around him, talking about, you know, potential Heisman stuff. He didn't deserve a Heisman prior to last week.
Right.
He definitely doesn't deserve it now. He wasn't putting up offensive numbers. He had his best passing day in a conference game against Texas last week. So that was good for him. But this Auburn defense is really good, and you wonder if they just get enough offense. And I think they can get enough offense in Nashville in order to be able to beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's a team that was a half yard away from losing to Missouri at home. You know, they've had a few close calls. They're a good football team. They've found ways to win. I to be honest with you, I just think Auburn's more talented. They have a better defense. And if there's one thing that travels in the SEC, it's defense. So I think Auburn's going to upset Vanderbilt. And then you've got your matchup of Bulldogs versus Bulldogs down there in Starkville at 12. And this is a Georgia team that's been talk about inconsistency. They've been consistent in the way they've played. It hasn't been a good way that they've played, but they've been consistent in it, and that they have not really shown up in the first half, and then they come out and they play a pretty good second half. At least their defense. Their offense is starting to kick it into gear in the first half these last few games. But this is another game where Georgia's played pretty much every game close this year. It's felt like, and you go on the road to Starkville, and Mississippi State's 5-4 record is a little bit deceiving. 3 of those 4 losses, all 4 in conference, by the way. 3 of the 4 of them, 1 possession losses. So they've been really close. They pushed Texas and Tennessee into overtime. Both of those were home games, and then they lost a close one on the road earlier this year to Florida by 2 points. It's a deceptive record, and they have a really good passing offense. Blake Shapen's done a really good job. He's thrown for almost 2,200 yards this year, and their top 2 receivers, Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans, have combined for about 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns already this year. That goes with the Georgia secondary that suffered some injuries last week to go along with some injuries they already had prior to that, and a secondary that has been known to bust in the back end a lot this year. It has problems written all over it for Georgia. It's a game where I think the upset potential is very much real and very high, but it's also a game that I've seen Georgia win all year. I'm still going to pick them to win because I need to see them lose this type of game in
Mm-hmm.
order for me to pick against them. So close one at noon in Starkville. I think Georgia comes out on top, though.
Well, let's hope that those cowbells don't get in the way of the game at that point. We haven't spoken a lot about the Big 12, but that game between BYU, who's number 7, and Texas Tech, number 8, it's going to be at noon with Chris Fowler and Kirby Kurt Herbstreit, blah blah blah. There we go on ABC. Mm-hmm. That might be one of the better games to watch over the weekend because of the parity in that conference is really amazing.
Yeah, BYU is a team that's been on upset alert pretty much every week since they got ranked. They've called some out throughout their schedule. They haven't all been easy wins. They beat Colorado by 3. They beat Arizona by 6. They beat Utah by 3. They handled business with Iowa State pulling away late there, but they've won their games in a similar fashion to what I was talking about. Georgia is not all of them have been easy, but they've found ways to win.
Right.
Which can say a lot more about your team sometimes than just being able to go out there and win by 2 possessions every time. Because when adversity hits, you may not know how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Texas Tech has faced their own adversity, though. They've had some close calls, and they ultimately lost one at Arizona State earlier this year. So I think if you're the Big 12 and Brett Yormark's their commissioner, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you're Brett Yormark, you're actually hoping that Texas Tech wins this football game because you want to be the two bid league. Mm-hmm. If you're the ACC and the Big 12, that's what you're jockeying for. You want more teams than the other one. So you want to be the 2-bid league. Right now, Texas Tech's already carrying the loss. Now, obviously, the committee thinks highly of Texas Tech. They think highly of that loss at Arizona State with Sam Leavitt healthy. That's a key factor in Arizona State, who they were then and who they are now. Mm-hmm. I think this is a really good spot for Texas Tech sitting there at home. They're favored by 10.5. It's a very big number. Their defense has been fantastic this year, and it's been really the anchor of their team. If they were ever going to make the playoffs and make a run, it was going to rely on that defense. Mm-hmm. It's worked out so far for them. They've got a fantastic defensive front. I did see, I think it was last week, I turned their game on, and one of their interior defensive linemen, Skylar Gill Howard, who was one of their big transfer portal adds from Northern Illinois, seemed to have some sort of a left arm injury, I believe. So yeah. I'm not sure I doubt he'll be able to play based on the way he looked. It looked like he was in a cast at that point. So there'll be a little bit less. But then on the other side, you've got Bear Bachmeier at BYU, freshman, wearing 47. That's a god-awful number for a quarterback. But again, they find ways to win. So the spread's against them. They're away from home. All the dynamics point against BYU. Everybody's probably going to pick against BYU. This is just a game that BYU's won this year.
And, if you look at it, this is, for BYU, this is like getting back to what they've always felt that they deserved, right? That they wanted this opportunity. If only they would be given an opportunity to be in a conference where they could, showcase their talents and for so long they were independent, and now, things have changed, and I think changed for the better for them.
Yeah. Also, just a note in terms of their scheduling dynamic. Mm-hmm. Texas Tech after this plays at home against UCF, and then they go on the road the last week of the season to play West Virginia. Relatively easy last 2 games following this one. Mm-hmm. BYU not the same. BYU gets UCF at home to end the year, but in between that, they play TCU at home, and then they go on the road to Cincinnati. They have a lot of work still ahead of them because of the nature that they've won their football games. Mm-hmm. Those games against TCU and Cincinnati, both really good football teams. Cincinnati 7-2, TCU's 6-2. They're both really good football teams with really good quarterbacks. And we know the way that the Big 12 has worked in the past years. It's been a league of parity and kind of collapsing in on itself. And so I think if you're Brett Yormark, if BYU loses this weekend, you're crossing your fingers these next 2 weeks because they don't have easy tests coming ahead.
Yep. In that same window, because BYU and Texas Tech noon at ABC, we already said that. You just spoke about your Georgia Bulldogs taking on the Bulldogs of Mississippi State. That's also in the 12 o'clock window. That's an ESPN game. The one on Fox, big Saturday and big 10 situation. Did you think at the beginning of the season that Indiana would come to play Penn State at State College and Beaver Stadium as basically a double-digit favorite?
No. If you told me
you had that on your bingo card, believe me, that was amazing.
Yeah, if somebody had tapped me on the shoulder preseason and said, "Hey, Drew Aller is going to be hurt before this game," I'd go, "Okay, maybe." But even then, that was never. Even if Drew Aller hadn't gotten hurt, you're still headed towards a situation where Indiana would have been favored in this game this year. They weren't playing well, anyways. But this is an interesting one. Not because I think Penn State will win, just because you saw Penn State give Ohio State a test at home last week. They were down 14-17 at half. They put up a good fight for one half of football. And while Drew Aller may have left, that running back room didn't change. They still have Katron Allen and Nick Singleton back there. Katron Allen's really kind of come on as more of the lead back this year. So that they still have the ability to have some of that toughness about them and be a tough out. I don't think they will be. I think Indiana, they've shown their ability to go on the road and handle their business this year. They've had some close calls, earlier in the season when they went on the road to Iowa, and that was a game that was 20-15, and maybe people thought, well, could they? But this is a spot that they've gone out and they've controlled since then. They went on the road to Oregon, they won by 10 there, and then the next game they had on the road was last week at Maryland, and they handled their business 55-10 there against a team who started off the year pretty well in Maryland. It's a talented football team. They kind of fell off towards the back end of this season, but it's the same situation that I've talked about it many, many times. Any given Saturday, you can get beat because that Penn State team, although you have a large discrepancy at the quarterback position between Indiana and Penn State, if Indiana doesn't show up and the Penn State crowd does and the Penn State team does, it can still create problems for Indiana on the road.
I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint of a team ripe for upset, this would be it. Because you're thinking, all right, Indiana's played the kind of games they've played. The number 2 in the country. They're at a position where they've never been before. And now they go to State College. It's a 102,000 seat stadium, which still will be filled, regardless of whether they're winning or losing. They do show up, and you're gonna have to wonder. All right. You could be behind before it ever gets going.
Yeah, you absolutely could. I'm also a little bit interested in the 3:30 CBS game for the Big Ten this week as well.
Okay.
Because how good is Oregon? Do we know how good Oregon is?
I don't think so.
I'm not really. I know how good they can be. I know how good they have been at points during this season. But it's also an Oregon team that I saw, 2 weeks ago play a 21-7 game at home against Wisconsin.
Right.
Not exactly an all-inspiring performance. And now they go on the road to Iowa, who has got that freshly minted 20th ranking in the country, and it's just a good old-fashioned Kirk Ferentz football team. They don't hit you with a lot through the air, but they're really good on special teams. They can run the football and play defense. So they've actually had a bit more of a scoring output these past few weeks. They've scored 37, 25, and 41 in their last 3 games. So their offense has caught a little bit of a hot streak. Oregon hasn't always done well on the road this year. You think about where that Penn State team is now, and I know they were playing a much different version of them when they went up there, but that was a double overtime game that Oregon walked into. They haven't necessarily – they played a close one with Northwestern, and I know Northwestern has come on as a solid football team, but they weren't world beaters in that football game either. And with that recent performance against Wisconsin, it makes me wonder what version of Oregon do I get? Because if I get the bad version of Oregon, Iowa wins this football game. But if I get anything from average to good from Oregon,
right,
and Iowa doesn't give their absolute A-plus game, then Oregon's going to win this football game. But there is a card that the card in there is if Iowa plays their A-plus game, even if Oregon plays their B-plus game, Iowa can still probably win this football game.
it's tough to play at Kinnick Stadium too. That's not, a lot of people think, well, okay, it's Iowa hasn't been. I mean, they've been a good defensive team, but they haven't found offense yet. And so I think that it's going to be fun to watch. I mean, that's an underrated crowd that shows up for the Iowa games out at Kinnick Stadium.
Yeah.
So there's pitfalls everywhere at that point.
Mm-hmm. I do have one other note on the way this game. If I'm guessing, the way Kirk Ferentz and his staff has probably drawn it up as an ideal game script here for that game is they want to drain this clock. Like they want to shorten this game to the best of their ability. Their strength is going to be in limiting possessions for Oregon offensively. And they can do that if they're able to run the football successfully. They're going to try to out-physical a really good Oregon defensive line. That's not going to be an easy task. But if they're able to run the football effectively, then they can limit the possessions. It talked about it. The college football nerds talked about it a couple of weeks ago. They did some research on how games and possession numbers have changed since the changing of the rules with the clock, and now it's a running clock until it gets inside of 2 minutes in the second quarter and the fourth quarter. And it significantly shifts your offensive possessions by somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 possessions a game is what you lose. And that plays into the hands of Iowa this weekend if they're able to shorten this game up and limit Oregon's scoring opportunities.
Looking in primetime, we already talked about Alabama and LSU. I'm kind of intrigued by the Navy-Notre Dame game because Navy running that triple option, and Notre Dame. Now, look, Notre Dame's a fine football team, no question. But year in and year out, Navy and Army have given Notre Dame some pretty interesting football games, which is not to say Navy's going to win. I'm just, the style that Navy plays and the fact that they have beaten Notre Dame in South Bend before just makes it, to me, just, one of those games where I'll watch for a while and see how the pace of the game goes.
Yeah, I mean, if Navy were to win this football game, you're looking at a very similar script to the one I just laid out for Iowa.
Right.
Where you're shortening this football game with your ability to run. Notre Dame didn't have any problems last week against Boston College on the road in terms of stopping the run game. They did have some problems stopping the pass. It, wasn't a clean game, but again, we talked about it earlier. Notre Dame won, so you're happy. You get out there with the win. You keep your playoff hopes alive if you're Notre Dame. So they have this test this week, and then next week they have what I think might even be a tougher test when they go on the road to Pitt. So this is a week about Notre Dame and their culture and what Marcus Freeman has built there. Because if it's what I think he's built there, then they're bought in. They're focused on Navy. They know that Navy's 7-1. They know that they run a different offense. And it's a defensive group that's gotten better as the year's gone on. They've gotten a little bit healthier on that other side. And it's also on the other side, you flip it to that offense. I love CJ Carr from week 1 in that game against Miami, and he's just gotten better this year. Last week, he threw for 299 against Boston College. He's been a really good option for them. The receiver group has gotten better with the emergence of Malachi Fields as well. And obviously, their tandem of backs and Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are up there with, the best in the country. There's no doubt about that. So, if Navy shortens this game and gets field goals instead of touchdowns, I still think that's a problem for Navy, because I think this Notre Dame offense can run up and down that football field quick on their defense. So I think you're in for a tough spot on an upset there. But if you're going to see it, it's going to be because Navy is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like they held the football for 40 minutes and Notre Dame got 20 in terms of time of possession. Like, you need to see a large time of possession discrepancy if you think Navy's got any shot at winning that football game.
Well, they do. That's the only way they can win, is to shorten the game at all. What was the other? Let me look real quick. We were talking about how far FSU and Clemson have fallen. That primetime game has been relegated to, the ACC network. So Florida State and Clemson are playing. They don't even get ESPN2. California and Louisville is in ESPN2. They're on the ACC network. If that doesn't tell you right now where those two programs are, I don't know what does.
Yeah, I think I would pick Florida State to win this football game. I know Clemson's at home and they're favored. Clemson hasn't played well at home this year. In fact, I think a majority of their losses have come at home.
Yes.
Let's see here. Yep. They lost to Duke at home. They lost to SMU at home. They lost to Syracuse at home. And they lost to LSU at home. 4 out of their 5 losses have came at home. That's not indicative of Dabo Swinney and his Clemson football teams throughout the entire time he's been there. Even last year, they didn't lose a whole bunch at home. So their struggles at home have been significant, and I think it's interesting. I wonder if they feel that crowd being it's a Clemson crowd that now feels less like they're with them and more like they've gathered in to just kind of see what's going to happen this Saturday, and when things start going bad, they're very quick to turn on them now. This is a game where it could turn on you. If Tommy Castellanos is able to make a big play or two earlier in that game and you kind of get Clemson behind the 8 ball, then I don't know how they're going to come back. I don't know if they have the fight and resolve to come back if that were to happen, to be honest. It's two really, really rough football teams. But as weird as it feels to say, I think Mike Norvell and the situation that he has in his locker room right now and where they are right now is actually a better situation than where Dabo and his locker room and his staff are right now. But I saw this week Eric McLean, a former Clemson player. He works for the ACC network now. He talked about Dabo Swinney and kind of where he's at right now, just in terms of the way he's feeling and his mental state. And if I remember correctly, I think he described it as like upset, things just aren't working, and he's very upset with the way things are going. And you can see that with like the outburst that he had on the sideline last week against Duke. So I think Florida State's going to win this football game, and I think the nightmare season for the Clemson Tigers will probably continue.
Well, the other thing from FSU standpoint is I think Norvell has got a team that he can go in there and say, look, it's us against them. The world thinks we're not good. Let's go out there and just beat a Clemson team and bury them. And, we'll see. But I do believe that that Mike, as you said, I don't think he lost the locker room. I don't know what Dabo is doing. I really don't. It's normally he's good at this, and now he's not. And that may go to what you just said, where he's in a place personally in a place that he has never been before and doesn't know how to handle it.
Yeah, it is interesting because that was the calling card for all of those Clemson teams. When he really got it going, is the way he built that. It was like, well, poor little old Clemson, and that was true for a while. And then I started getting guys like Trevor Lawrence, and it's no longer poor little old Clemson, but it's now we've got a bunch of 5-stars that have the mentality of poor little old Clemson. Right. And that's what made them the most dangerous. And that's where you get the team that blows Alabama out in the national championship. That's gone though. When they've lost those games, especially early in the year, and they weren't able to get back up and they weren't able to rally the way that Clemson teams had in the past when they suffered losses. I mean, even last year, to an extent, although they lost 3 games, they still had some form of rally when they made the ACC championship game. They won that game, and they made it to the playoff. They even had some fight in them in the second half against that Texas team last year. But they've just been devoid of fight this year. And it's nothing that any statistic or high school recruiting ranking could ever predict. But it's just something that's happened this year. And it's puzzling given Dabo's tenure there and the way he built that thing.
Yep. He built that thing to basically last. And that's not what's going on right now. Let's we actually have a game tonight, which before we jump over to the pros, a big one in the American, and that's Tulane and Memphis, game being played at Memphis. That really is going to. We talked yesterday when we were talking about USF and UTSA that the American has 6. That has had 6 teams with 1 loss records of only 1 loss and in the conference. This one, if Tulane beats Memphis, Tulane then would have the inside track to. If USF would win out, they would be the 2 teams in the championship game. I don't know how this is going to play, but I think it's going to be fun to watch Tulane. They're on the road and they play Memphis in a game tonight, which clearly has Group of 5 playoff implications.
Yeah, I'll toss you another potential storyline with this game, and it's maybe one that people see coming, maybe one they don't. This is a potential matchup of future head coaches that we might see next year.
That's a good point. Yeah,
both of these guys are tied. Summerall's tied pretty heavily to that Auburn job, and Silverfield's tied to that Arkansas job to an extent. So these guys are both sought after coaching candidates that will probably shift their focus, and if I were guessing, probably not be in the same place they are right now come this time next year. But as of right now, both these guys are in the midst of a conference race. 2 really good football teams. Tulane's going to run the football. That's what they do with Jake Retzloff. He can throw the football well, but he is a dual threat through and through. They're going to have to get his legs going and make sure that they are more than one-dimensional tonight, because Memphis has been really good at home. They've been really resilient at home. I think that's the most impressive thing that I've seen from Memphis this year is their resiliency in some of these games. And the 2 that come to the top of my head are home games for them, and those games against USF and Arkansas. Right. Both games that they had to fight to win. And I think that's really impressive. And it's, it was inexplainable when they went on the road and they lost to UAB. It's a game that I didn't understand then. It's a game that I still don't understand now. And listen, if they come out on this one, on top of this one, they got their work cut out for them the rest of the way. But this is not going to be an easy out tonight on a shorter week. But for Memphis, they have the luxury of being at home,
which is a very important part.
Yes.
And they there's been a lot of conversation about, Memphis, USF in their case, blew a lead at the end, and then there's the other situation where the Arkansas fans are saying, well, if we don't fumble that ball, then we end up winning the game. Well, the point is, we talked about it before. A win is a win, whether it's ugly, whether you feel as if you deserved it or not. They won. Memphis won those games, and you can't get past that.
Mm-hmm.
And if Tulane goes in tonight and plays a good game and beats Memphis, and tip your hat to them, because they will have deserved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're a USF fan,
mm-hmm.
as you are, you're rooting for Tulane tonight.
Sure,
because that gives Memphis their second conference loss. That puts everything back in USF's hands in order to make that conference championship game,
right,
and ultimately have a shot at that G5 playoff bid.
Right. And I was watching the ESPN guys last night, and it's James Madison, it's USF, it's Memphis, it's Tulane, and I think Navy was in there somewhere.
I'll give you another one that's just kind of hanging around in that American Conference race that nobody really talks about a lot, and that's
mm-hmm.
North Texas.
Oh yeah,
they've played really well this year. They're 8-1.
Yeah,
they're 8-1 this year as well. Their lone loss coming to South Florida, which might I add, South Florida kind of gave it to them, 63-36.
Yeah.
But again, they've got a lion's share of their work on the back end. Is manageable. They go on the road to UAB. UAB is 3-5. North Texas then goes on the road to Rice. Rice is 4-5, and then they get Temple at home to end the year. Temple's 5-4. So of those teams, one of them has a winning record, and it's just above 500.
Mm-hmm.
So North Texas has an easy path to the end, but on the other side of that, they also have a South Florida team that has beaten them and only has one conference loss. So they do have that mountain that they would have to climb. They'd be rooting for Navy next week, UAB the week after that, and finally Rice as well. But
Golish last night said, for those who don't, Alex Golish is the head coach of South Florida. He said that they asked him, what'd you do during the bye week? And he said, we watched the fourth quarter of the Memphis game. And he said he and the coaches and the players sat there and said, never let that happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And because they were all Todd Orlando's defense, was just relentless on UTSA last night.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they can keep up that kind of, that type of play. But if they can, then, it's going to make a very interesting situation for the rest of the season, because they get Navy next week. And then they finish the season, with UAB and Rice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, that Navy game looms, but any one of those teams can beat you. I mean, if you're not on,
mm-hmm.
or, if Byron Brown has a bad day, it's, it is what it is.
I'm more looking forward into the end of the year, and that bid that's going to come from the group of 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I genuinely think in all of the G6 football that I've watched this year, which, some, not a ton, but for everything I've seen and all the top teams that I've seen, I still think South Florida is the best team. I know they went on the road and they lost to Memphis, but I watched that Memphis game with them. And to be honest with you, like at the start of the fourth quarter, I stopped paying attention to that one as much
mm-hmm.
when I was watching it. So I was like, USF has this. Like, this is USF's game. And
mm-hmm.
you look over there and you're like, oh, well, it's not USF's game. I think they're the best team. They seem like they're the most talented and the most physical. They have the best quarterback in Byron Brown. I would like to see them make it to the playoff, because I think in terms of a playoff in general, because, I said I think yesterday the way it sat is that G5 team would be going on the road to Georgia.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not going on the road to Georgia. Maybe they're going on the road to somebody else. But regardless, it's still going to be a really tough road game that you're facing. And you would like to be able to have it, when you're thinking about teams that have a chance to go on the road in these places and potentially win. I think USF is probably your most likely winner in that scenario.
If you go, I mean, if USF is fortunate enough to get there, the one thing, and I look there, I harbor no illusion that if USF would make it to go to Athens to play Georgia, that that it would not be Georgia heavily favored, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that I would say that is the wild card, and this is not, hell, I'd even take a close loss to Georgia personally from that standpoint, is that Alex Golesh, when he was the OC at Tennessee, at least understood what Kirby was doing.
Yeah.
That gives him a little bit of an advantage over some of the other, G5, G6, whatever you want to call them, teams from that standpoint. Does that mean that they're going to win? No. But they do have some athletes. And usually, and we've said this numerous times, it's not the difference between some of the P4 teams and some of the G5 or 6 teams is depth. And Georgia, God knows, has a lot of depth in that regard. So it would be an interesting thing. It'd be a lot of fun to watch. But at this point, you got to get there first. And so, USF has to take care of their business. Georgia has to take care of theirs. And if it is meant to be, it'll be interesting. It'll be entertaining. But we still have some more football to be played.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I do feel a lot more comfortable looking at the bigger playoff picture now that we're in this final home stretch of the season, and you do get a much clearer picture week in, week out, and every game matters. I know that they used to matter a whole heck of a lot more, before we expanded to 12. Like it's a situation now where I'm looking at different schedules and I'm like, okay, well, this team can afford a loss here and probably still make it. This team can afford a loss here. Like those top 3 teams, Ohio State, Indiana, and Texas A&M, can all lose. They could all lose in the most embarrassing way possible this week and win the rest of their games, and everybody forgets about that. Like that's the thing I don't like as much about it. But that's a different tangent. But they feel like they mean a little more because now your losses feel more magnified later in the season because you don't have room to make up for them now. Early in the season, you kind of go, well, we lost that one, like the way Texas did. The way Texas started the season, it's like you go on the road and lose to Ohio State. Oh, well, we put ourselves out there. We went out there. We tested ourselves. We've got 11 more games that we can go make up that loss in. Now you don't. Now if you lose right now, you have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 games to make it up. So you've got a ways to go in terms of being able to finish the season for a lot of these teams. Some of them not easy tests, but this is where you get your mental fortitude and your culture. These are the culture tester games because this is the hardest stretch of the season to remain focused if you've been successful up until this point.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I've seen a lot of people talking about, Notre Dame, that the CFP wants Notre Dame in the playoffs. They have to have it because of the ratings and blah blah blah. And then there's the Miami fans who are going, well, wait a minute, they're ranked number 10, and we beat them, and here we are. Well, you beat them, but are you better than they are now? Probably no. And so, you can cry about it, but I don't think it's going to make any difference.
Yeah, no.
From that standpoint, anyway. All right, let's move on over to the NFL, and here's what we got. We obviously know what happened last night, Vegas and Denver. The morning game, your favorite, in Berlin. The NFL Network has that game. Adam Armin and Kurt Warner will be on the call. Indianapolis, surprisingly good team in the AFC. Atlanta, well, I'll let you handle that. For those of you, by the way, in Atlanta, you will be able to watch the game if you don't have the NFL Network. You can watch it on WAGA, which is Fox 5 in Atlanta. If you're in Indianapolis, it's WXIN Fox 59. In Indianapolis has the game at 9:30 kick. Atlanta needs this game, and you could argue that Indianapolis does as well.
I cannot think of a reason why I would pick Atlanta to win this football game.
Okay.
I can't. I genuinely can't. I talked about the inconsistency and just how inconsistent they are. What they've shown, and that's what they've shown you. They're 3-5 right now, and they've lost a lot of football games in not great ways. You know, they lost last week on a missed field goal. That was fun. They lost by 24 points to the god-awful Dolphins. They lost by 30 to the Panthers. You know, they got pretty well taken care of when they went on the road to the 49ers. They're in a stretch now where they've lost 3 in a row, and now they take a road trip and a game they're playing outdoors because, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that Berlin Stadium is not a dome.
No.
And as I've chronicled very, very much so, Michael Penix 0-4 outdoors in his NFL career. Bijan Robinson has not been the same back when they play outdoors. He has not been the same back, to be honest with you, on this 3-game stretch, even when they played indoors. He hasn't been very effective as a runner of the football. I don't know why that would change because we're as good as the Colts are on offense because they have been really good on offense. They've got a really strong defensive line. And that secondary got a lot better this week when they added Sauce Gardner. He hasn't been the rookie version of himself, but he's still a really good coverage corner with a lot of length that they're probably going to shadow Drake London with. And when you don't have the receiver depth like I talked about earlier in Atlanta, then if they can shadow your number one and take him away, and Bijan hasn't been an effective runner and they have a good defensive line, how are you going to get offense going? Maybe you turn to your tight end and Kyle Pitts, but I think Indianapolis has been the best defense in defending tight ends. Or it's – what is it? I think Atlanta's been number one defending tight ends. I think Indianapolis is 7th defending in terms of tight end usage or allowance this year. So it's not like Kyle Pitts is necessarily set for a big day if Indianapolis stays true to their season-long trends. So their Falcons' run defense hasn't been good all year. Jonathan Taylor's been fantastic. That Indianapolis offensive line's been fantastic. I see no reason anyone should pick the Atlanta Falcons to win in Berlin on Sunday.
No, it could get ugly fast. Let's go to the early games on CBS. CBS's early game, New England, Tampa Bay. That's Jim Nantz, Tony Romo. That's their A game. You got Baker Mayfield, and you got the Patriots with their superstar young quarterback.
It's kind of interesting because even though they don't play each other and there's not a rivalry, now you think of these two teams linked forever due to Tom Brady.
Right.
But two teams that are really like, I don't think the Buccaneers being good surprised anybody. Maybe people were surprised by how good they've been. But I don't think anybody expected the Patriots to be 7-2. And there's been much chronicled about how the Patriots have been beating up on lesser opponents. But, you know, you beat the teams you play, and that's all you can do. But now they get a little bit of a better test. This is 6-2, but then they go back and they get 3 straight against the Jets, the Bengals, and the Giants. So if the Patriots can win this one, we want to talk about a game that could really build momentum and set you up for a really special season with some of the opponents that you have ahead. This is a prime spot for New England, because looking at their season, they play 2 teams that have a winning record as of right now. The remainder of their schedule, Tampa Bay is one of them. The other one are the Buffalo Bills at home. So if they get this one, they have the potential to do something really special if they're able to maintain focus on week in and week out operations.
Well, I think the key here and the fun part of it is that Tampa Bay had a week off to get ready, to get healthy. Probably be a better way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Patriots are okay with the fact that suddenly, they are in that situation where they're relevant again.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know if it surprises a lot of people, but it's definitely a situation where you look at it and going, these are the guys we want on the field, and they're starting to come back, and that's good for you. So you got two teams that should play a very entertaining football game.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about the quarterbacking situation? Why, are the Patriots getting better quarterback play than they haven't, since Brady left?
Yeah, I mean, I love Drake May coming out of college.
Mm-hmm.
At North Carolina, what Mac Brown had done. Then again, in all fairness, I liked Sam Howell a lot coming out of North Carolina as well, and he's been a dud so far, sadly to say. No, but Drake May has the right tools, and I think combining that with Mike Vrabel this year has been a really good thing for the young quarterback. You add that with, they went out and they got Stephon Diggs. They added him a weapon outside, a little more of a security blanket. Austin Hooper's played really well, or not Austin Hooper. Hunter Henry's played very well, and been a consistent safety blanket for him. So I think it's year 2. I think he feels more comfortable in the offense. I think he feels more comfortable in kind of the way things are going around the building, because Gerard Mayo was there for 1 year. I'm not sure if they intended it when they made the hire, but he was a stopgap. And so it's understandable. Things were a bit tumultuous last year in New England, but they've settled in. They've got their guy for, probably as long as Mike Vrabel wants to be there and he's winning. Mike Vrabel will be the head coach of the New England Patriots. So Drake May has this ability to kind of settle in, and he's found himself. And they've had the luxury of playing a little bit of lesser competition thus far, and they will down the road. But, they're winning, and that's all you can say. And it's not like they've just beat the bad teams. They went on the road and they beat Buffalo at home. Like, Buffalo was at home. It's a team that beat Kansas City at home last week. So they've done a really good job. They've maintained some pretty good balance in their offense, and their defense has played very well.
Absolutely. And excuse me, as we move down the road here, Jacksonville and Houston, that's an interesting matchup. Buffalo, Miami, that one, I think I don't know what to think about that one. I think Buffalo goes down to South Beach and just gives it, lays it on them.
Yeah.
Cleveland at the Jets. I'm certain that unless you're a Jets fan or a Browns fan, that those would be the only people watching it. Mm-hmm. Arizona, Seattle is the late game on CBS this week.
Yeah, that was one that if you pitched it a couple weeks ago would have been a really good game. But right now Kyler Murray's out, Jacoby Brissett's currently in at quarterback, and that's not really something that gives you a whole lot of inspiration going into the number 1 pass defense in the NFL in Seattle. So they have their work cut out for them in that respect, going on the road up there.
Yeah, and it's never easy for sure. Giants and at Chicago, Joe Davis and Greg Olson on that call. This is the Fox games, and the Giants are getting better. The Bears are getting better. You got 2, young quarterbacks. Chicago's starting to play more consistent. So are the Giants, but both of them seem to find ways to lose games that they should win. I guess I frankly don't know how to handicap this one. This one is a baffler to me.
Yeah, no. If I were a betting man, at least on the NFL,
Yeah.
I would not be touching this one with a 10-foot pole because you really don't know what you're going to get from either of these teams on a week in and week out basis. Caleb Williams may throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, or he may throw for 125 and 2 picks. Like there's just no. It feels like the middle ground is really missing in this Chicago Bears offense. It's either full go or it's no go at all. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know what you're going to get out of him. They get DeAndre Swift back. He's healthy again, so he'll be playing this week. Roma Dunze last week, who's been really their top wide receiver, Caleb's top target for the majority of this year, had 0 catches. I thought that was interesting and telling. So they put up 47 on a really bad Cincinnati defense last week. They're playing another not fantastic defense in New York, but New York can't rush the passer. So if they're able to make Caleb Williams feel uncomfortable and feel like he's a bit rushed, then the Giants have a recipe for success in this game.
Which is in some regards scary, in other regards kind of like okay, we'll take it in that situation. So let's move on to okay. We got Baltimore, Minnesota, two teams that absolutely. This is more important for Baltimore than it is for Minnesota. Um, if they want to keep track of keep their pace and have a chance for the entire season. It's kind of right there for them. So we'll have to see how that works out. New Orleans is at Carolina. That's Carolina's up on the upswing.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing better football, no question about it. So that should be an interesting game, and they're playing at Carolina. Detroit is at Washington. I can guarantee you that would be if do not allow your children to watch this because it's going to be ugly.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, Washington has not played well in the last couple of weeks, and now they don't. They have gone without Jalen Daniels, and this Detroit team is pissed off because they lost last week to Minnesota. So this one could get real ugly real fast, but
Mm-hmm.
a good game. The doubleheader for Fox, Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady. It's the Rams and the 49ers. So that should be an entertaining game.
Yeah. Quick note on Jaden Daniels. It said I read something this morning that said he had avoided surgery on his dislocated elbow. So that's good for him. But then going back to that 49er Ram game, that's a game that's always really good. You go back to the NFC Championship a few years ago in 21, I believe it was. That was a fantastic game, and every time they get together, Shanahan and McVay, they dial it up and they put on a show for everyone.
And we've spoken about that, about the how they how they seem to, regardless of where they are, they seem to be able to find a way to, whether one is fighting for the title and the other one is, at the bottom of the totem pole. That these two teams, they don't like each other, and I guess since we look at the Steelers and the Ravens and the Giants and Philadelphia, and some of those people, and you sit there and go, that this is these guys are rivals regardless of what the records are. And I guess since we don't always see San Francisco and the Rams, that a lot of people on the East Coast just don't see the true measure of what this really means to these guys.
Yeah, apparently it takes Richard Sherman going on national television and calling out wide receivers for people to really take notice of the NFC West rivalry.
Right. And I think that this one should be fun. And we talked yesterday about how really cool the fact that these two coaches worked on the same staff.
Mm-hmm.
Makes this a very entertaining game.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But there is, as they say in the business, potential here.
Absolutely.
So, all right. There we go. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? Any things that you say from standpoint of this weekend, please watch, must watch type situations?
Well, I'll have a full Georgia Mississippi State game preview out later
Okay.
this afternoon. So I'd ask that you go read that. Um, in terms of anything in particular to watch, we talked about the number of teams that like could make something happen this weekend in college football. You know, maybe doesn't always give you the top matchups like people tend to have an appetite for this weekend, but just pay attention to the games, pay attention to the scores, because there's going to be maybe it's just one game, maybe it's 5 games that pop off and you go, what's going on where? Like it's another Saturday in college football, which means upsets are on the horizon.
Yeah, don't get too upset. It happens a lot, and yeah, not a bad thing. All right, gang. It's been fun. We've had a good day here. Thanks for joining us at an earlier time than we were normally scheduled for. But horse racing at 3:00. Fred York and the gang will be there, and so drop by and say hello to them, and leave a comment, hit the bell, subscribe, and let us know what's going to happen from your standpoint. Give us your thoughts. We're always here to answer questions. All right. Okay. Have a good weekend, everybody. We will see you come Monday.